We trust words because we're afraid to see the truth in small things. It never begins with what they say. It begins before that, in the pause before they speak, in the twitch of a finger, in the subtle lift of one shoulder when a certain name is mentioned. You'll miss it if you listen only with your ears. But if you watch closely and quietly, the body always speaks first. Carnegie once said that people rarely lie with their eyes, but they almost always lie with their hands. The mouth may say, "It doesn't bother me," but the jaw clenches half a second before. The voice may claim, "I'm fine," but the diaphragm holds the breath just a little too long. Truth lives in friction, and friction leaves a mark. I once sat with a man who told me he was over his past. His story was clean, practiced, almost boring. But as he spoke about his father, his left thumb pressed into his palm, rhythmically, like a pulse. Every time he said, "We're good now," his knee bounced slightly, like his body was trying to discharge something his mouth had no room to express. That's where people reveal themselves, in the mismatch between language and nervous system. When what's spoken doesn't align with what moves underneath, the mind filters, the body releases, and the deeper the dissonance, the more visible the tells. No one teaches this. You just start to notice it, after years of listening too hard and still not feeling convinced. After conversations that felt complete but left something in your gut unsettled. That unease isn't your imagination. It's your body picking up on someone else's contradiction. You'll see it in arguments. The person who raises their voice to sound confident, while their feet point toward the exit. You'll see it in affection, the hug that feels warm on the surface but leaves no weight behind. Words fill silence, but movement fills the truth. The first time you notice it, you'll feel disoriented, because it means everything you've trusted, tone, narrative, story, might have been rearranged to survive. But the body doesn't rearrange. It reacts. And if you're willing to look there, before the sentence, before the defense, before the justification, you'll see who someone really is. Not in what they tell you, but in what moves before they can stop it. When someone defends before the question, that's already the answer. You learn more about a person from what they defend than from what they confess. But more than that, you learn the most from how early they begin defending. Before accusation, before inquiry, sometimes even before the topic shifts in their direction. I once asked a man how he handles conflict. I hadn't suggested he was bad at it. I hadn't implied anything. But his response came fast. "I mean, sure, I get angry sometimes, but I'm not cruel." I remember the way he rushed it, like the sentence had been loaded long before I walked in. His shoulders didn't square, they sank. His voice didn't rise, it quickened. And in that moment, he told me everything I hadn't asked. Carnegie used to say that our defenses are often pre-programmed, rehearsed in childhood, polished in early rejection, triggered by nothing more than a passing glance. The person you meet in that moment isn't reacting to you. They're reacting to everyone who ever made them feel unworthy before you arrived. Watch for it, not in content, but in timing. A woman laughs and says, "I know I'm difficult, but at least I'm honest," before anyone calls her difficult. A man says, "I'm not trying to be controlling, I just like clarity," when all you asked was if he'd prefer coffee or tea. These aren't answers. They're shields. The person doesn't know you're not holding a weapon, because life has taught them that being seen often comes with being judged. Justification without accusation always reveals something, a soft spot, a bruise, a story that wasn't allowed to end gently. And the thing is, people don't defend who they are. They defend where they were hurt. When you hear someone explain themselves too early, too eagerly, with too much force for the moment, pause. You've just entered the hallway of something sacred, not the defense itself, but what it's trying to keep you from seeing. Because the fastest explanations are rarely rational. They're reflexes. And every reflex points to a story someone wasn't ready to tell. But their tone, their speed, and their urgency already did. What we despise is often just what we're afraid to become. Some people don't talk much about themselves, not directly, but listen closely when they speak about others. That's where the material lives. You'll hear it in how quickly they roll their eyes at a certain type of person, in how tightly their voice closes when someone makes a mistake they wouldn't allow themselves to make. In the sigh, in the sarcasm, in the pause just slightly too long to be neutral. They think they're talking about someone else. But what they're really doing is describing a part of themselves they haven't forgiven. Carnegie used to say that projection isn't a weakness, it's a survival reflex. The human psyche can only carry so much self-discomfort before it tries to store it somewhere else. Usually, that somewhere is someone nearby. I've sat across from people who say things like, "I just can't stand needy people." but their whole nervous system contracts when they ask for anything. Others who roll their eyes at drama, but can't hold silence without fidgeting. And then there are the ones who blame others for being fake, yet rehearse their own tone before every meeting. Blame is never random. It's precise, and it often reveals what a person is either afraid they are or afraid they'll never be allowed to become. One man I knew couldn't stand arrogance. It happens because something deep in your nervous system is still trying to finish an old story by starting it again. Carnegie believed most repetition wasn't memory, it was identity. Not the kind we show, but the kind we carry. And when that identity is shaped by unresolved roles, the fixer, the invisible one, the over-apologizer, we don't find new people. We find new places to repeat those roles. I once worked with a man who always ended up with partners who needed saving. He'd say each one was different wounds, different histories. But somehow, every relationship ended the same. He was exhausted, and they were distant. He wasn't choosing them. He was choosing the version of himself that he had once believed was the only way to stay needed. The pattern is never random. It's familiar. A woman kept getting into conflicts with narcissists. But when we slowed the tape, what we found wasn't just about them. It was about how quickly she gave up space, how she confused being agreeable with being safe. Her pattern wasn't who she met. It was who she became when she met them. Watch for it in your own life. If the ending keeps repeating, the story isn't external. It's coded. You're not addicted to the pain. You're trying to recreate the moment where it could have ended differently. If only someone had chosen you, seen you, stayed. But here's the truth. No new scene can fix the old one. Unless you stop playing the same part in it. Everyone has a mask, not to deceive, but to survive. It's not built from lies, but from habits. From learned gestures, practiced phrases, calibrated smiles. And most of the time, it works. We keep it in place at work, in relationships, even with ourselves. We believe in it. Until pressure comes. And pressure, unlike pain, doesn't ask permission. It just strips everything away. Carnegie used to say that control is only as strong as the system beneath it. And when the pressure rises, deadlines, conflict, abandonment, threat, the nervous system doesn't reach for logic. It reaches for history. You go back to the version of you that first learned how to handle fear. I once saw a man who seemed endlessly patient. Always calm, always smiling, the kind of person who never gets angry. But one evening, under pressure, he snapped. Not in violence, in disappearance. He left mid-conversation and didn't return calls for weeks. Not out of cruelty, but because retreat had been his only coping mechanism since age 9. That was how he learned to feel safe, by vanishing. Another woman, sharp and confident in every room, began shaking during a confrontation she hadn't expected. Her words didn't fail, but her hands did. Because when the ground beneath her shook, she didn't become who she wanted to be. She became who she once had to be, a child holding herself together in a house where loud voices always meant danger. This is the part of the story no one sees coming, not even the person living it. And this is why pressure matters. Because what breaks under it was never solid to begin with. It was managed. People will say, "That's not like me," after a rupture. But it is like them. It's just a part they've worked hard to bury. The younger version. The original setting. So if you want to understand someone's truth, don't just listen to who they are when they're stable. Watch who they become when the mask slips. That's not regression. That's memory. There's a moment most people miss. Not the answer, but the pause before it. A split second between hearing and speaking, where the body prepares, the mind sorts, and the truth, if only for a blink, stands unprotected. That's where the signal lives. Not in the crafted sentence. In the stillness that precedes it. Carnegie believed silence is not absence. It's exposure. The nervous system doesn't lie when it's caught off guard. You ask a simple question. How did that make you feel? And watch as the mouth stalls. The eyes shift. The hands search for something to touch. Not out of deception, but out of sudden access to something raw. I once asked a woman how her last relationship ended. She smiled and said, "It just wasn't right." But between my question and her smile, there was a freeze, barely half a second, but dense. Her lips pressed together, her eyes flicked to the left, and for a moment, her whole system stopped. She answered cleanly, but the truth had already passed. Another man told me he was fine after a long conflict at work. The word was quick, but the space before it, too long for comfort, too short to notice, was filled with something heavier than frustration. His chest had risen and stayed there. His breath caught. Not in pain. In management. That's the thing. We manage our words, not our reactions. The silence between stimulus and response is where instinct still lives. The child, the memory, the real answer. And the more someone trains themselves to perform safety, the more important that silence becomes, because it's the only unscripted part that remains. If you want to know someone's truth, don't rush the gap. Ask, then wait. Let the silence hold. Because people are never more honest than when they haven't had time to lie yet. Everyone has a second face. Not the one they wear in public or the one they choose in private. The real one is smaller. It lives in the corners, in micro-choices, in stray reactions, in what someone protects too quickly or criticizes too sharply. Carnegie believed that people don't lie about who they are. They just reveal it in places they aren't watching. And if you want to understand someone deeply, don't focus on what they tell you about themselves. Focus on what they defend without being attacked. Focus on what they mock without reason. Focus on what they always circle back to, even when the conversation doesn't ask for it. I once listened to a man who often said, "I don't need anyone to take care of me." He was proud of his independence. But when someone else was praised for being gentle, something in him shifted, a forced laugh, a clipped comment, a tension in his jaw. He wasn't being cruel. He was revealing where tenderness had once been unmet in his own story. Another woman spoke of how she hated people who seek attention. But her eyes lit up when someone acknowledged her work. Not greedily, longingly. The very thing she dismissed was the thing she still quietly hoped for. That's the second face. The one that flinches when someone touches the truth. The one that shows up in sarcasm, in avoidance, in how someone moves their hands when a specific name is mentioned. The face that wasn't built to hide. It was built to survive. You'll see it clearest when no one's watching. When the person is tired, or safe, or startled. Because the second face doesn't know how to perform. It only knows how to protect. And if you can sit long enough, without judgment, without pressure, and just notice what they fight to conceal or rush to control, you'll find it. Not the mask, not the story, but the thread beneath all of it, the part of them that never stopped trying to be seen.